Welcome to another episode of Let's Grade, where I walk you through my comic book screening and grading process, where I will take a raw comic book that I've recently picked up and go through the grading process in fine detail, where I walk you through how I take a book and give it a general assessment and go through each of the defects that I encounter and how I determine what the final grade should be in terms of how I catalog these books in my collection. And then the assigned grade that I give the book plays a big part in ultimately what I decide to do with the book. Today we're going to take a look at a book that I've been after for a long time, really happy to finally have it in my collection, and that is Amazing Spider-Man number 194. Amazing Spider-Man number 194 is one of the most popular issues of Amazing Spider-Man because of the first appearance of Black Cat. It is a fantastic first appearance in story and on the cover. There's no questionable cameos or anything of that nature. It is a very straightforward character first appearance as she appears right here on the cover with Spider-Man, illustrated by Al Milgrom. The issue is written by Marv Wolfman with interior pencils by Keith Pollard, inked by Frank Giacoia. So this is the Newsstand edition. There's also a direct version as well. And I'm going to take a look at the grade for the first time. Now, while I did have scans of the book where I could kind of make my own assessment through the scans, one of the things that drew me to the book was the fact that it was listed in fine condition and I was in the market for an affordable copy. And as I further scrutinized the scan, to me, the book felt a lot better than a 6.0. So the very first thing that I do is I'll look at a book and I give it just an overall assessment. Is it low grade, mid grade, high grade? And then what are some of the trouble spots that I need to look for? Now, at first glance, I'm looking at the book, kind of using the light to kind of bounce elements of the cover off to look at any sort of indentations, which I'm starting to see at the top. And I'll share these with you as I go through the book, but there's definitely some rippling towards the top, and then some color breaking ticks along the spine. Very minor, 2 significant ticks right here. I'm not seeing too many other indentations. The cover is more or less flat. Something very, very minor right here. And again, this is just sort of the first assessment. And then flipping it over to the back, I'm looking for things like dirt or scuffing or anything of that nature. There is definitely a fold that's happening here and some other ink stains or other just items that would keep the back cover from just being completely clean. So overall, it's definitely in the mid to high grade. So just kind of putting myself on the spot very quickly, I'm looking at somewhere around a VF to a VF near mint copy, something along those lines. Now I just sort of use this as a baseline to kind of figure out just how far up and down the grading scale I want to go, because I know just right off the bat as is, this book is not a 9.8. And so kind of zooming in a little bit more detail so you can see some of the defects I was talking about. Here is the indentation, which, you know, again, if you're looking at a scan online, this is where it's really tough because you can't see this until you start to angle it in the light with the book in your own hands. But there's a significant crease right over here above the G, and then you can also pick up the rippling that's happening along the top cover. So this is why, as is, it's not going to be a 9.8 candidate. These are pressable defects, so that's what I'm trying to keep track of as far as what is the grade as is, and then what is the book's potential. And then just shining the light across the trade, everything looks more or less flat. The corner is, I would say, exceptional. I don't know if that's a 9.8 candidate corner, but probably in the 9.6. So that is a good sign. And then in the character and price box, there's really nothing that's wrong with this. It looks clean, everything's sharp, no spine defects whatsoever until we get below it. And here's the first significant spine tick, and you can see it's probably a good ½ inch going into the book away from the spine. And then just below it, there are probably almost 4 consecutive ticks. So there's this first one, and then an additional 1, 2, 3, 4. These two are very close together. Actually, these three are all grouped together right there. So there's an additional 4, so 5 ticks altogether. I, looking at it closely, believe that there's probably 4 that break color. The one that's about a 1/2 inch, and then an additional 3 that break color. And then on the second half, the lower half of the book, there are no spine ticks at all. There is a slight stack increase that could have just been the fact that I had this book stacked with others in an order that took me a while to open, but I was most likely going to have this book pressed anyway, so it doesn't bother me. The bottom corner is just outstanding. It is super sharp, nothing in the UPC box here, and the lower edge is absolutely magnificent, very sharp. All the way to this edge and this corner, no dog ear that I can see, maybe just something very, very subtle and slight right in there, but very hard to pick up. However, CGC is going to notice this. Any professional grader would see this and start to count up some of the defects. So just on the front cover, I would say that we're probably looking at roughly a 9.0, 9.2 possibly, but I always, if I am between 2 grades, I always just pick the lower grade. Little things like this tiny dimple here by the UPC right in there, like that, to me, that would be what would kind of split the tie and make this a 9. So I'm kind of saying, just based on the front cover, we're looking at a 9. The other thing I would say up here in the top right is some color loss, in almost as if it was like a giant tape pull in a way. And so this is something else that would have to be dealt with. I don't know how much this would detract from the book beyond a 9.0, but just from the looks of it, just to be on the safe side, I'm probably pulling the grade down to an 8.5. And so that's just based on what I found on the front. Now on the back, you'll see a number of like these ink stains, and these always give me trouble as a grader because I'm not exactly sure if it looks like it's been, it came off of a roller. Is that manufacturing? But also it does affect the presentation. There is a bit of a dog ear. It is very subtle and slight on the back corner. Hard to see. I'm trying to position it in the light here, but let's see. Right there, you can kind of pick it up. It's very faint, but it is there. And then it is also a little bit of a fold right in there. You can kind of see tough against the white, but it's definitely there. And that could be improved with the press. More like ink staining or color loss on the back here. So with all of this, again, just if I'm leaving the front of the book as an 8.5, I'm starting to see a number of things that on the back that probably definitely pull it down into the 8. But now we're trying to see, can it remain as a very fine copy, or is it going to drop from there? A few other additional ink stains, a little bit of a fold crease here that I talked about before. Right in here, you can see the history there of this book with the page being folded over. And I just flipped it over one more time to see if I could tell if the book had been pressed previously. And there's just too many, just slight creases around the front cover that leads me to believe that it hasn't been. Looking at the back of the spine, the tough part here is you'll have the staples on the back, not on the edge. So that's going to add an additional challenge if the book were to get pressed, and just some discoloration. It's possible just some light dry cleaning could pick up some of this off the book, as I believe some of this is dirt or even light color rubbing that's just not that deep into the book, that could just be gently improved. And that's really it. Again, the corners being sharp, I think it's going to save it. Like, that's just a really, really nice looking corner on this comic. So you could see there, just really, really nice structurally on the corners. This one, again, when I was saying this is the top corner where I said it's probably more like a 9.6 corner than it is a 9.8 corner. When I see that corner on a modern book, here it is from the front, it's typically what gets me to assign it a 9.6 instead of a 9.8. You can see the rounding and softening right there. So, of course, I'm being very, very specific and very picky with this book, but I am trying to determine what the grade is, because this book has a lot of different values in different grades, and a lot of times the half grades really make a big difference in terms of the value, and then ultimately how it will influence my decision as far as what I will do with the book. Now, I will say that I am going to indicate that this book needs a clean and a press. I don't think there's any way around it. I think that there's just a number of defects. Most I would think would be straightforward, but there are some advanced defects in terms of the dot dimpling that would need potentially a tack iron or steel ball work in order to get those out of the book. But at this point, before I reveal what grade I'm going to assign the book, I wanted to give you a moment to think about what would be your final grade. Just to kind of recap, I left the first assessment at a 9 and then started to roll back from that, and left the front cover at around an 8.5. I do think, just thinking about my initial assessment and going over the book in general, I probably would pull it down even to an 8. Now, looking at the back of the book, the back is a mixture. So the ink staining and some of the color rubbing, and I'm thinking about the color rub that was on the front cover too, which makes me want to think that it was really more like an 8.0 than an 8.5. The back of the book to me seems to be okay. The trouble spots for me are those really faint dog ears, the sort of like the remnants and history of what once was. It's possible that this book did have a fold at one point, somebody unfolded it, and it has been unfolded for many years and maybe just naturally flattened out. It's possible somebody tried to press it, but it doesn't look like it to me. And so if I were to assign a grade to this book, I would give it a 7.0 with a clean and press, and I believe that it could max out at probably an 8.5. And so that's kind of my range of a 7.0 to an 8.5, which I think is not bad considering it was listed as a 6.0 fine. And without doing anything, I think that the book is really a whole grade above a fine, up to a fine, very fine in my assessment. Let me know what you think the grade is for this book. Would love to get your comments. Did I miss anything? Or if you have any other comments, things that you saw when I was going over the book, or if you have any opinions on some of the ink staining or ink splashes that appear on books from this era, I would love to get your feedback on that as well. Thanks for watching, happy collecting, and see you next time.